All right, we're back. Last demo, last session of the day, but by no means the least important. We have a very exciting launch today, talking a little bit about AWS App2Container. I won't sort of spill the beans on what it does just yet, but to tell us a little bit more about it, the expert in the room here, Prakash Aradhya, lead product manager on application modernization here at AWS, joining us to talk about this very exciting launch. So, Prakash, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me here.
Okay,
Welcome.
so we're talking app to container. I think there's a lot of sort of foundation laying we're going to want to do here to sort of give the lay of the land. And we can start, very, very, very far upstream here. We're talking about modernizing applications. That can mean a lot of different things. That means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But especially we're talking about the move to the cloud, this takes some very particular technical meanings. We think of things like containerization, which I think is sort of intuitive in this conversation. We think of things maybe like, moving a monolith to microservices and so on. There's a lot of different things here. I know the App2Container primarily deals with Java and .NET applications, so why don't we start there? What are the roadblocks with respect to modernizing Java and .NET applications?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Nick. The modernization could mean many things to many people. Sometimes people think modernization could be like something like, you're bringing from a 50-year-old application to the today's world, right? That's not really what it means. We've been through the software development cycle over the years. We're probably talking about applications that were created like 8 to 10 years ago. There are so many applications, the development cycle, the whole the development process of applications has changed so much over the years. Things that were created like 8 to 10 years ago are not really, they're still usable. They're still business, like the logic is being run and the business, the enterprise is running business around it. But I think, they're not meant for today's way of, developing applications and releasing application, right? So like you mentioned, the applications could be a big monolithic application. It's not really agile enough. It may take like 3-4 months to make any changes to the code and redeploy and all the stuff. So in today's world, the businesses cannot wait that long. They need to make a change today and deploy the change in in 2 hours, right? That's a level of agility that the businesses have to react to the changing market conditions, the competition, all kinds of stuff. So the agility is the most paramount important thing in the modernization. With all those applications sitting out there, it's not possible, right? So when enterprises think about modernization, there are multiple ways they can do this, right? It could be like, they have these applications. They want to take advantage of the modern infrastructure, the new CI/CD management and monitoring of these applications. They can just take it, push it into the cloud, like a whole migration of the VMs. It's like a rehosting application, right? That's one of the ways. There are many ways you could do it. One of the ways it could be like, you refactoring the code, like some of the code that you have. For instance, like .NET, right? Microsoft stopped supporting .NET. So it's kind of it's a unsupported thing suddenly, right? So now there are like millions of applications that are sitting on .NET. So those applications needs to continue to be supported by customers, and they need to need to find a newer platform, newer world. Maybe there's an opportunity to kind of refactor some of this code and continue to evolve the code. So if you own the code and like if it's a custom application, it makes perfect sense. So you have developed the code and you have the code in house. You can do some refactoring, and after refactoring, you can re-platform it to the cloud environment. So that's an option you have. In some situations, the enterprise customers have bought some the commercial out of the shelf applications. Some of those applications, you don't have anything. You don't have the code, and it's just been sitting there for 10 plus years, but you still have a dependency on those applications in your business. Those applications, you probably just want to take advantage of the modern architecture. You want to just move to the cloud, containerize it, and move to the cloud. So that's like replatforming. So there are a lot of options customers have when it comes to modernization. So with that, I think we recognized there's an opportunity, and we launched 2 new set of tools last week. One is called Portability Assistance for .NET applications, which really helps customers to kind of take their .NET applications and provide them the ability to look at the compatibility for the .NET code, which is a more open source and more evolving platform. So they can, as a customer, you can reduce the cost of deployment, when it comes to running the applications and kind of modernizing the application to the newer mode, that kind of stuff. Similarly, and in addition to the porting assistant, we also launched the App2Container, which is the topic of today. So where we can help customers to take their applications, containerize it, and deploy to the AWS.
So, lot to unpack here, right? To paraphrase some of what you said, essentially, when I gave you this sort of broad breadth of modernization means a lot of things, you just went through it and named, a large number of them. Refactoring, modernization can mean everything from refactoring your code to general architecture to deployment infrastructure and so on and so forth. So what's exciting about today's session, we're talking a little bit about App2Container, but there was also this other launch, similarly the .NET Portability Assistant tool or Compatibility Assistant tool. So cool. You touched a lot on containerization, but I think that's sort of, as the name implies, what we're going to dive a bit deeper on in this talk. I'm familiar with containerization. I know many of our customers may be, but I think it's also important to sort of reestablish this baseline of why containerization is important. Docker got very famous on the idea of, building once and deploying anywhere as sort of the flagship mantra of containerization. But it's clearly more than just the ease of use of deploying software, right? There's a lot of downstream features that are enabled once you've sort of bought into this containerization framework. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Prakash. What are the biggest values that customers find when they containerize their applications?
Right. I think that's a great point. I mean, you alluded to many of the benefits of containerization, like the agility and the portability. So you build once, runs anywhere. I mean, it's not something that new that we are hearing today, right? Like if you roll back 20 plus years ago, like Java, the whole premise of Java was like to be able to build an application run anywhere. In today's world, in the modern world, it's like it's containers, right? And everything fully packaged, and there's nobody can complain about, oh, you missed one dependency, you missed one library. So now you like, okay, complete package that I know that it works and it is tested, and you just have to open it and run it and it should work. So developers don't have time to go and debug a lot of those things. They want to be able to focus on the business logic. They want to kind of continue to quickly take advantage of the infrastructure to kind of help you take care of all the plumbing and all this logistics. So those are the benefits, like where people want to containerize it, which is fantastic. But now the enterprises have a kind of a mixed situation, right? I mean, pretty much everybody, I think I know there are some data points, like about 90 plus customers, enterprises today, they are looking at creating all new applications in containerized space, right? So that's great. So now you're adopting a new methodology of creating applications in a containerized world, but at the same time, you have all these applications that are sitting there for years, kind of using a different kind of system, like the managing of those applications, the whole CI/CD process, the whole the management aspects. So now, as an enterprise, you need to deal with two different kind of systems. You need to hire people who can do both kinds of systems. There is no, and at the same times, you may not even have people who knows the legacy systems. So it becomes very challenging. So now customers like to streamline and have one set of tools to work for both sets of applications, and they're kind of looking for ways to kind of manage those and streamline their whole operations, cut costs, and become efficient, and kind of have one way to manage their applications. So that's where I think the containerization of the existing applications, whether it's Java applications or .NET applications, like millions and millions of applications that are there, without throwing them away or rewriting the whole thing from the scratch, the customers are looking for like a seamless way to move to the modern world.
That's where I think we should talk about or get a little bit more specific. Like you said, there's lots and lots of existing .NET applications that might run on premise. They've built up over time. They've been running for years, and the .NET framework is lots of different things, right? And just to be 100% clear, what we're talking about here are ASP.NET applications running on IIS. Is that right?
For the containerization part, yes, you're absolutely right. What we are supporting the containerization is like an ASP.NET application running in the IIS server. We can take that, containerize it, and move to the cloud. But the other tool that we talked about, portability assistance, can help you, refactor those .NET applications to, .NET Core based applications.
Right, right. And just to kind of add a little bit of context to that, because I know we had questions about .NET from people in the chat earlier. When we say ASP.NET applications on IIS, let's also try and give a sense of the negative space. What is this not? So for instance, this is not going to help you port a WPF application. That, if you think about that, doesn't even make sense, because that is something that can only run on a Windows client anyway, right? And that is also full .NET that has no equivalent in .NET Core, so containerizing it makes no sense, right? So there's, when we say .NET, I think we you know, in order to kind of get ahead of any confusion, there are, what we're really talking about is a certain kind of .NET application that runs as a service that sits there and accepts, you know, HTTP or TCP requests. The one that you're talking about here, the tool, you can run on any .NET application, but the converter itself, what that's doing is containerizing the ASP.NET application that is running within IIS. Is that fair?
True. Absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Well, definitely some useful context on sort of the space of which App2Container is gonna, the types of applications App2Container is gonna be working with here. But you know, understanding the benefits of containerization are great. But as easy of a developer experience as they introduce for things like reproducible deployments and CI/CD downstream, the question of how you actually containerize the application, or how you arrive at that containerized pipeline, is still one that a lot of folks need to grapple with. And you know, when we talk about costs of building a pipeline or learning, you know, how to do something in a different way, the educational cost of actually learning containerization and Docker and these underlying technologies is non-trivial. So when we're thinking about problems with actually moving to containers or containerized architecture, what are the actual steps or problems that prevent people from doing so currently?
Right. So I think we talked about the benefits. It's great. I think it makes total sense for enterprises to kind of, you know, to do the actual containerization. But the process itself is a multi-step process, right? It's not just like, you know, you run something and you just containerize it, you throw it away. I think the process is like, it requires understanding the application itself. You know, whether it's a, you know, if it's a cards application or a custom application, like the kind of dependencies it has for all the different kind of libraries, the third-party libraries, whatever dependencies it has, understanding all the different dependencies, going through the profiling the code and understanding all, you know, even the network dependencies, the ports that they're running. So it's quite a lot of work to understand the application itself. So once you understand the application, and then it's a process of, you know, creating the Docker artifacts. You know, kind of, you know, it's a lot of manual work. You know, you need to write the Docker file, and, you know, kind of trying to translate all those dependencies and the network dependencies into the Docker file and figure out how the Docker should look like. So the skill set and the knowledge you need to understand how the cloud environment works is quite extensive. I mean, not everybody comes with that skill set. Very limited resources within the enterprise who knows those stuff to do. And then once you create the you know, the Docker file and creating the Docker image, and then you know, figuring out how to deploy this into the container platform, taking advantage of all the, like, you know, the load balancing and the, you know, the VPC, all of the stuff. It's a multiple stages, but it is quite a lot of work and the skill set needed. So it is you know, it's just a big effort.
Awesome. You know, I guess some examples that I've seen, you know, like you said, there's a lot of moving parts, and that's a you know, I think that's a commonality, and there's no reason to shy away from that, right? Like, those costs can have a positive ROI downstream with containerization. But you know, when we're talking about doing this, let's say on AWS, there's a few assets that are very much necessary for this to be possible. I mean, the most foundational one is the Docker file, you know, that's necessary for the application itself. But then things like, if you're going to run on EC2, you need task definitions. You need to handle your networking. You mentioned ports before, right? These are all things that, even separate from containerization, if we're talking about modernization, moving to the cloud, are table stakes, essentially, or necessary for doing this in an effective way. At least for, you know, Java and .NET applications. There's different ways to containerize applications on things like ECS and, you know, so on and so forth, right? But App2Container needs to help with these to be able to make that effective, right?
Mm-hmm. So that's exactly the reason why we recognize customers are wanting to do this. They want to take advantage of the cloud world. So that's great. I mean, we do see that the amount of effort is quite extensive. So that's why we conceived this idea of App2Container, and we created this and we launched it. And we've been working with a lot of our customers, understanding their pain points and where we can really create value in this tool. So the App2Container tool makes it really, really easy for you. Pretty much, I can show you when I show you the demo, you can see an application running in your local server, and the application completely moved, containerized, and moved to the cloud without touching the code, without going through using a lot of the default things. Right now, of course, it's it's a happy path for normal things, but there are opportunities where you could we could optimize it for a better performance in the cloud, right? So this is good. So yes, App2Container, it will do the complete analysis of your application. It provides you a list of applications. Okay, here are all the applications that are currently running in your environment. You can analyze an application, and it will create the Docker image, Docker file, and it will create the task definitions or the YAML file if you want to move to EKS. And then it will also provide you the cloud pipelines, and you can seamlessly integrate with the CI/CD pipeline within the AWS or your own favorite CI/CD environment that you have. So it makes it really seamless and easy for you to kind of take on the modernization effort with very limited knowledge.
So I feel like I have a very coarse understanding of the problems and the solutions that App2Container solves, but I guess I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about how this is working. What is the experience as a user? Because I understand up here, upstream, I have, let's say my .NET or Java application. And then downstream here, I have, ideally on the happy path, some containerized workload that's now running with all the necessary networking and bells and whistles that are required to do so on AWS. But what is the actual process by which we go from over here, start to finish? How do I use App2Container?
So it's pretty simple. We are GA. The product is available on our product pages, and you just go download the tool to your local machine wherever your application is running, or in the production server, or the staging server. We generally recommend staging server. We have multiple modes that we can support. So technically, you download it, install it on the local machine, and then you kind of initialize it. You connect that the CLI. It's a command line tool, so you connect that to configure that to your AWS account. It's not mandatory, but if you want to kind of eventually deploy it, you need to connect to the AWS account. So once you configure it, so it's just a series of commands that I'm going to show in a little bit. A series of commands. First, you'll do show me the inventory of applications, all the applications that are currently running in my server. So it will go through, go through the server, and it will dig up, and it'll find out, okay, here are the applications that are currently running in your environment. They are eligible to be containerized. That's great. So now I want to understand a particular application that I want to containerize. I pick up that application and say, give me an analysis of this application. It runs through the analysis, and it comes back with, okay, here is a big list of things that I found, and these are the dependencies that you have. These are ports and all this stuff. And once that is done, then you say, okay, now I understand things. If I want to, as a user, if I want to make some modifications, I can make it, or I can just use the default. And then I say, okay, now give me a containerized application. So use whatever the base image that you have. Depending on if you're using the .NET applications, you can use base image of Windows 2012 or 16, or then for Java, you can use the Linux or Ubuntu, any of those base images. And then the application is containerized, and it will give you a complete application. Then you can ask for, okay, I want to now do the deployment, create all the deployment artifacts. Give me the task definitions. It will give you the YAML file if you want to go to the EKS. All of those artifacts are generated for you, and now you can go look at those artifacts and see if they're all good. And then you say, okay, just deploy this to my ECS instance, right? So it's just step by step, like the way the workflow that you want to walk through. It kind of takes it and put it into your ECS account seamlessly without much effort.
So to be as clear as possible, or as succinct as possible, because you threw in a lot of additional context. In addition, I guess we sort of merged the developer experience as well as what is happening under the hood. So let's sort of decouple those for brevity's sake. Essentially, this is App2Container is a CLI. It's open and available. You can download it, install it wherever you so desire. You then run this CLI on the infrastructure that is running the application that you're looking to containerize. The result of that CLI command is ultimately going to return a set of applications that it detects running on that infrastructure, of which we discussed some of the valid ones that it can containerize before, like ASP.NET IIS web applications, Apache Tomcat, JBoss, and some other Java .NET web applications that are being assessed. And then once you as the user select one of those through the CLI, it will then generate these artifacts and essentially be like a CLI wizard for automating the generation of these assets automatically by scanning. And one of the interesting things that you touched on that I'm actually going to pass it over to Rob to talk about a little bit is auto detection of things like dependencies, right? So every language has their own package managers and their ways of understanding this. But something that's really interesting to me is that and maybe I'm misspeaking here, but like this is essentially a running application that you can run and detect this and actually ascertain what all of the dependencies are during runtime, which is more than just assessing like a static repository and reading what's in my requirements.txt in Python, right? I'm not as familiar with .NET. Like what are some of the challenges of actually understanding all of these all of these dependencies?
So it's, I mean, if you're doing it manually, you probably like kind of going and looking at the scripts and understanding all the dependencies that it has, and like kind of getting a complete list of that is quite a lot of work. I mean, some of the times the skill set required by the developers, I mean, some of these applications could be really, really old, right? So today's developers probably don't have much context. So that's where the challenge really lies, being able to kind of capture when you're doing something manually, understanding all the dependencies. So that's the burden this App2Container kind of takes that off from you as a developer. So it will do that work for you. And again, it's not like it's not an extensive thing. It's there may be some instances. I mean, based on the application that is currently running, it can pick up all the dependencies what it knows, but there could be some application dependencies that may not be discoverable by the tool. So if you're an expert user, you probably know, okay, there's some dependencies missing. You could, we recommend customers, like once you create the containerized app, we recommend customers to do a lot of local testing of the containerized image before you move that into production. So during that time, whatever the testing methodology that you're using with all your testing, so when you run through those tests to make sure there's no dependency that is missing in the application that is containerized.
Yeah, and just kind of make that crisp by way of example. I think well, I'll give you an example. You tell me if this is what you're talking about. But one of the common use cases when you integrate an ASP.NET application with IIS is to use integrated AD authentication, right?
Right.
And then, but as far as the .NET app is concerned, that authentication flow is kind of magic. It's kind of environment based, and so when we containerize that application, we're really just containerizing the logic, that unit that is running within IIS.
Right.
And that we can't really containerize. I mean, this would be an intractable problem for any sort of automation, but we can't containerize AD, right? We can't go and scoop up that AD endpoint and then all of its backing, credentials and whatever. We have no idea how to do that. Well, we can use LDAP, but anyway, that's, just keeping the world somewhat sane for a moment. Right? Is that an example of what you're talking about? Where I think what you're saying is this does a lot, but it's not a tool that you basically put on autopilot and it does everything for you. At the end of the day, it's going to spit out a Docker file, it's going to find your ports, it's going to do some things, but ultimately at the end of the day, you as the maintainer of this service or this piece of code have to apply some level of human oversight in view to say, well, actually, we do use AD integrated auth. And that's not going to work unless we figure out how to provide that endpoint to the containerized version of this app.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the tool does the heavy lifting. It does most of the work for you. So you don't need to start from the scratch. You don't need to go build everything right now manually. So it does the heavy lifting. It gives you the framework. It gives you all the templates. So now as a user, when you run through your test, like the same test that you've been running for the application that are running locally, the same test that you want to run against this application, the containerized image. So then you catch a lot of those things that are possibly missing, and then you fix those things So all these templates are easily editable. Like, every step, like, you go through the CLI process. Between each of those steps, you could, when you do the analysis comes back with like, the whole JSON file, and you can go add stuff or remove stuff, whatever makes sense based on your testing, and then recreate the image and then go through the process. So yes, I mean, it is really important. Like simple applications, it's maybe like just a simple containerization is done, like the demo that I'm gonna do, right? But in real world, there may be like some more complex dependencies that you have to manage. So you want to make sure those things are taken care of before you move to production.
Absolutely. Well, I think we need to see a demo because what you're talking about here can potentially save a lot of time, and I think everyone's wondering what it looks like to use it.
Yeah. So let me share my screen. So okay, I hope you can see my screen now.
Yep.
So what? So just a couple of quick things, and I know I think we touched upon this. So the App2Container, the container supports like different kinds of workload. Your source could be coming from local machine or local, the on-premise server, or maybe running in a VM, or it could be in EC2, or it could be any other cloud, right? Whatever is the source, a .NET application or Java application, sorry, ASP.NET application running on IS server, or Java application running on a Spring Boot or Tomcat or JBoss, WebSphere, WebLogic. So all those applications are supported through the App2Container. And then the App2Container can take that, and then you can create register the app in the ECR, and then work through the deploy to either ECS or EKS, and create the code pipelines and so forth. So what I'm going to show in the demo in a little bit is like basically walk through these phases, right? These are the commands that are supported in the A2C command line tool. So initialize, configure, then the inventory, create the inventory, look at the inventory, analyze, containerize, generate deployment, task definitions, and then kind of repeat through those steps. One quick thing about the split mode, I mean, there's some situation customers don't want to run the containerization tool on the production server if they don't have the staging server, right? In those kind of situations, they could use what is called split mode, where they can run the application, the inventory analyze on the machine where the application is running. Once that is done, they can do the rest of the load in a worker machine. So there, it can take that JSON file, and then it can work through and containerize it and deploy it to the AWS if you chose. So those are the things you could do. So I have two applications. Let's see. I can see my, okay, I have a Windows application, like an ASP.NET application, or a Java application. So maybe I'll go through this Java application. So here what I'm doing is I'm running a Tomcat application. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly check what version of Java I'm running. So it's 1.7. It's out of support. We know that it's outdated. It's not necessarily that it has to be 1.7, but it could be 1.8. And I have an application running in my Tomcat server locally, which it's a Elastic Bean application. Like you're probably familiar with these, the Snake application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for what processes are currently running. I just quickly do the look for the services that are currently running. So I see that there's one service. So I'm running in the Cloud 9 environment. The good thing about this Cloud 9 environment, I can quickly go and preview the application that I'm running. So I just want to show the local application that I'm running in my machine to look at the application itself. So it's a Beanstalk application. You can look through the application and see, is there Snake? It's a pretty cool application if you've not seen it before. So this is a Java application. It's currently running in my local machine. So I want to take this application now containerize it and move to the cloud, right? So I go to the other shell with the root access. So what first thing I need to do is to do the initialization, right? So here, so I run through the init command from the App2Container. So in this init command, what it does is it configures the environment that I'm running. So I just take the default one, so the workspace directory. I'll use the local one. the AWS profile and use the default one. So S3 bucket, if you are going to deploy, you need to provide the S3 bucket that you are going to be using AWS. If not, you can, if you containerize it in local, put it in the local environment. So you could just use the default. So the reporting the metrics, that's great. We can do that. And then the currently not going to take the default now for the trusted thing. So the configuration is saved. So the initialization is done. The tool is ready to be used. So the first command, as we talked about earlier, so we want to do the inventory of the applications. Like, I want to see how many applications are currently running in my environment. So I only have one application, the Java Tomcat, that's saying that it is the application ID. In general, there could be multiple applications running, but today in my environment, I only have one application. So the next step I want to do is I want to be able to go deep into that application and understand the complete dependency of that application. The process we are following here, it's the same thing for the ASP.NET applications. It's just the same commands. There's no difference in what we are following through. So I take the application ID, and that's the ID that I'm using here, and run through the application. It's pretty quick. It came back quickly, and it showed. And it also shows the next steps after your, it says analysis is successful. Now you can do the next few steps. So the analysis.json is the file that has all the details, about the dependencies, the network dependencies, and all of the stuff. And the next command that you are going to be using is the containers command. So before that, let's take a look at what's there in the analysis.json, right? So this is a pretty detailed file that shows a lot of details about the command line, the variables that were used, and some of the the dependencies, like the libraries that are used in for the application. So it's a pretty extensive thing, and you have an opportunity to remove and add stuff there if you choose to, if you want to exclude some files and so forth, right? So now the next thing is you want to first extract all those dependencies, right? So what this extract command does is it creates a tar file by picking up all those dependencies that you have for your application, right? Once that application, the tar file is created, so then it becomes easy for the containerized command to go through and create a containerized image. So one of the things that you need to do before you containerize is you need to know which base image that you want to use. So currently in my machine, I have the Amazon Linux base image. But if you choose to use something else, like a lot of enterprises are standardized on a specific image, you can always have that as an option. And now that what I'm going to do is I'm going to call, do the containerized thing, containerize the command. So it goes through, it takes a few minutes. So once that is done, so it comes back, says it's successful. Now when you look at the list of images, I can see the images that is created just a few minutes ago. So it's built on top of the Amazon Linux, and it takes the applications and puts it on top of it with the JVM, all of the stuff that is needed with all the dependencies, libraries that you asked for. It's fully containerized, and now that application is ready for the next stage. So you have a way to optimize it if you think the size is big, and you can go back and if you know certain things that should not be included in the image, you can go to JSON file and fine tune it and do a lot of those things. So the next thing is I want to generate all the deployments, right? So I use the generate app deployment command. It goes through and generates all the deployment artifacts that are needed. So here it's a pretty quick thing. So you look at the artifacts. In the deployment file, you go and you look at the environment that you are using. I'm currently targeting the ECS. That's where I want to put, and which by default is configured like 2 CPUs and then like the memory usage. One of the things that I'm going to be looking for is like a VPC ID, so that I know that I want to push it into one of my environments. So it's something that I want to add there, the VPC ID. So the one that I have in EC2, that's the one thing that I want to configure. So once I configure, now it's ready to be deployed. So this is the deployment artifacts. So this is great. So I save this file, the deployment JSON. Now I go to the next stage, which is really the deployment. So I'll just submit give a deploy command with the whole string. And now it's going to go through and it's taking the container, pushing it to the EC2. So now we can go to the console and see while it is trying to deploy the application. So it's going to take a few minutes because connecting to ECS and going through the whole process. Then you can go to your cloud formation in your console and you can look at the deployments that are currently going through. You'll see two in progress. One is the standalone, the other one is nested, based on the configuration that you provided. So it takes a few minutes, for it to complete. So you can see that in progress. Once it's done, it says it's done. So now you can go back to the console. Okay, now it's done. So once it is done, so you get the load balancer endpoint. So you use that endpoint. So that's where the application is now running. Remember, this is the containerized application. It's running inside EC2, inside ECS. So that's where it's the same application what you saw in my local machine earlier. Now it's fully containerized with a few steps that I went through. So now it's running in the cloud, as a same application, right? Again, it's for a normal application, it's all good, but in some situations you have to go through a lot of testing before you do the thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop here. The next steps I think you can also do is you can create the cloud artifacts and the cloud deploy. So it will generate all the pipelines and it will integrate seamlessly with the AWS environment. So now you can go and seamlessly manage those things. So that's what I wanted to show. Basically, what you saw is the application that is currently running on my local machine. It's the same thing for ASP.NET applications or Java applications. Go through a few steps, and then it takes it and containerizes and put it into either ECS or EKS environment seamlessly.
Yeah, so that's a lot end to end, right? But I think that if we really frame this as what is the alternative, what is the status quo for modernizing and containerizing applications for .NET and Java, we see that is something that would not have been able to be covered in a 10-15 minute walkthrough like you described right there, right? We talked a little bit before about the roadblocks or the significant hurdles to containerizing applications. And really, if we just break it down into the handful of discrete steps, I know we jumped around a bit between the AWS console and your IDE, where you were showing us a little bit of the config, a little bit of the application itself, or starting up the Tomcat application. Really, you just have a handful of discrete steps. And again, this is very much a garden path for a set of applications for .NET and Java, but you have your application running on your deployed infrastructure. You install the App2Container CLI. You profile the applications that are running through a CLI command. You select the application that you want. App2Container will then generate the necessary artifacts. And then App2Container also helps you to deploy that application with said artifacts to the cloud. Now, this is, again, didn't seem entirely hands-off, right? We still walked through some of those configurations and understood what those are. But when I think about sort of this set of challenges to deploying or to containerizing and then deploying, we basically have narrowed the scope of the things that you as a developer need to learn and understand to go from 0 to 1 from this very, very, very large mountain of methods and objects and entities to a much smaller sort of surface area, which seems a lot more approachable to me.
That's right. It also helps with the scale, and now you can take on more applications. And with the limited skill set that you have within the organization, there are very few cloud experts who can do all these things manually. So now you are kind of really enabling the common developers to kind of take advantage of this and move the applications faster to the cloud.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think this is going to work really well for the kind of applications that you're targeting here.
Great. Well, this is very exciting to me, and again, it is still very much early days for App2Container, right? We launched earlier on this week or the week prior, shortly before this episode, essentially, and it seems like there's a lot of things I can imagine I want to see down the road from something like this. I guess if we're opening up that discussion around potential future features or roadmap where applicable, something that I would like to see is more language expansion, right? I think that when we started this conversation around what is the value of containerization, what are these roadblocks that exist, I know we dove deep on Java and .NET and a lot of the functionality already that we saw in the service or in the tool is centered around that. But I think that value around containerizing applications exists cross language, and so not only is extending the functionality or the feature sets for .NET and Java important, but I'm excited to see this hopefully someday for lots of other languages as well, because one could argue that some of these languages that are more prevalent nowadays maybe have a broader set of resources to enable containerization, but I still think that this sort of experience of going through a CLI and just in a few discrete steps being able to pop out a containerized application and easily deploy that to the cloud, that's a really enticing value proposition. So I'm excited to see that down the line, hopefully.
Absolutely. I mean, when we work with our customers, we try to understand, where their real pain points are. The kind of applications, like .NET applications, they don't see a way forward. They really need some help. And some of this, the existing Java applications running on for a long time. I think those are the applications they really wanted us to help with. So that's the one we picked up as a starting point. And some of the other languages they mentioned, some of them are already probably, modern, so they don't need a big modernization support, but to your point, kind of accelerating the containerization process, it's a big value for even those applications too. We definitely will be looking forward to kind of expanding the support, adding more and more languages, and even the targets. Like for example, today we are supporting deployment to ECS and EKS. There may be additional targets like Fargate or Lambda. And also there are opportunities that we can expand into, how do we take these applications, like big monolithic applications, can we kind of break this down and create more microservices kind of architectures and containerize each of those services? I think there are a lot of possibilities. I mean, I think that in my opinion, the modernization is not a done thing. It's a continuous thing. There's going to be a continuous modernization throughout our lifetime.
Yeah, again, as new technologies and deployment vectors come into play, the need to be able to transport applications in the way that they're authored or the way they already exist onto these new platforms is going to be an ongoing battle. I think that's very well said. And even to the point before around the value of Docker being build once and deploy anywhere is something that, even Java had, a lot of claim to fame around. And what becomes easy or what is the easiest solution is not just subjective, but will change over time as these new technologies are released. So well put in that it's sort of this ongoing battle. But hopefully it doesn't feel just like a battle, but this ongoing ability to optimize and deliver more value over time, right? Like we wouldn't be worrying about these things if there wasn't an upside to them. So hopefully the juice will be worth the squeeze. Just have to sort of find the way to get there.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I think that about does it for us in this session. We have a little bit we're going to close out on after this, but again, Prakash, lead PM on application modernization, talking to us a little bit about App2Container. And so if folks want to get started with App2Container, again, it's a CLI. You can go and install it, get started with it. We have links to both the Jeff Barr blog post, the product page, and the documentation. We will get those thrown in chat. I know a lot of people have been also asking about whether this video will be available after the fact. By default, right after this episode's over, it'll be available here on our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/AWS/videos. Additionally, we'll be uploading this to YouTube, and we even have a podcast. So if you'd prefer to be listening to something like this, you can find us on a lot of the major podcasting platforms. If you need links, we'll try.
By the way, the tool is free. There's no fee for this.
Yeah, so again, it's a CLI. It's free. Install it. Do with it what you wish. And many of the target or all of the target deployment vectors right now currently for those artifacts in addition to the Docker file are AWS oriented, things like ECS, task definitions, networking, configuration files, and so on. Awesome. Well, thank you, Prakash. Rob and I will be right back to close out the show, but sit tight. We've got just a few minutes left in the show. We'll see you soon.